Villanova Sports Talk here on this Thursday afternoon. Glad you could join us. 30 minutes into the show at the halfway point. Still 30 minutes left to go. David Szczepanski alongside Dylan Johnson here on WXVU Student Radio. Just talk about the men's team. We'll, of course, kind of rehash some things in terms of what we talked about with the men's basketball team and the struggles of the past couple games in the poll questions coming up in about 15 minutes. But before we get to that, I want to talk about Villanova women's basketball. The Wildcats coming off of a 66-55 win against DePaul yesterday morning. Early morning game. That was such, before we get into the game sets, that was such a cool idea for Villanova. They had a lot of the elementary school, high schools in the area come in and watch the women's team. It was tough to cover that game because we had classes, but that was a really unique thing, and I'm happy that Villanova did it to try to get more people to come in and watch the team and watch the games, experience the fin, experience the atmosphere. So that was amazing, and I wish, elementary and high school that I had the opportunity to do that, get a day out of school, miss classes, go watch some basketball. So great experience there for the fans yesterday at the Fin. Villanova, they pulled off the victory on the court as well. Again, 66-55 final score. Jasmine Basco returned to the starting lineup, did miss the previous two games with an injury. She was listed as day-to-day, made some progress against Marquette, and then was able to get back into the starting lineup yesterday against the Blue Demons. And it seemed like she didn't miss a beat, right? 5 for 13 from the field, 8 for 11 from the free throw line, was able to score 18 points, had 5 rebounds. Basco was excellent, and Maddie Weber was excellent too. 8 for 15 from the field, 18 points. Weber on Monday was named to the Big East Weekly Honor Roll. And when you kind of thought about things heading into the season for this women's team, you thought about Basco and Weber. You really needed that duo to perform well, even though Weber struggled a little bit against Seton Hall and UConn. This was really what you imagined, right? These two players coming together to score, 36 of Villanova's 66 points. They really performed well. It was exciting to watch.
Yeah, and I think you summed it up well. This team relies on Basco a lot. I think she's the difference maker for this team. I think as a freshman, she's been doing incredibly well. She's averaging 15.5 points right now. And it's a rarity, I guess, to kind of see freshmen perform at such a level, especially in women's basketball. You see a lot of red shirts, you see a lot of stuff like that. So for Jasmine Basco to come into a team who lost a lot of their players last year. They lost Lucy Olson to Iowa. They lost, they lost a lot of players. So to come in here and step up as a freshman and get a lot of playing time puts a lot of weight on your shoulders, and I think Jasmine Basco has been really taking that well, especially down Bryn McCurry, who's been out with an ACL injury for this entire season. She looked really well in the, limited minutes, you could say. She got towards the end of the season. She really started to step up. And Maddie Weber, obviously, has been playing great, too. She's the leading scorer besides Basco. And I think that without Basco, this team is a completely different team.
That's, I think it's obvious, but it's a true statement, right? And you have to bring up Basco when you talk about this women's basketball team because, she really is the offense, right? And as you said, Dylan, she is just a freshman, but Coach Dylan always talks about, how good of a player she is, how much basketball IQ she has, on and off the court, but also, just the little stuff that she does right with the assists, with the passing, defensively, I think she's also growing throughout this season. Yes, she will turn the ball over at times, and Dominic and I have talked about that last semester. That's kind of what comes with, a freshman point guard, still learning college basketball, still learning the Big East, still learning the system that Villanova is running. But, heading into the season in a year where you said, Dylan, you lose Lucy Olson, you lose Christina Dulce, two of your top players. Jasmine Basco has really filled that void very nicely for the Wildcats. When you look at some of these stats, from yesterday's game against DePaul, 44% from the field, Villanova shot, 32% from behind the arc. And those numbers were higher. Towards the end of the game, Villanova struggled. They went on a scoring drought in the last 2 minutes. They were 1 for the last 10 in the fourth quarter, but they still outscored DePaul by 6 in the fourth quarter. DePaul kind of came back. Villanova had a lead at halftime. DePaul played really well in that third quarter. You saw Jory Allen, who is their leading scorer, really step up. She scored 20 points. She was 6 for 16 from the field. In the third quarter, they really got things going, but Villanova really responded, fantastically in that fourth quarter to, respond and eventually pull away and win this game comfortably by double digits. And, DePaul, they're not a great team in the Big East, but they're solid. They played some tough games this season. They're not a great offensive team, but their defense can get things going. Jory Allen, though, was a really good offensive piece. They're well coached. For Villanova, this was a good win for the Wildcats, especially after a game against Marquette that you really wanted to have, because when you think about where the Big East standings are going to end this season, you think Villanova and Marquette are going to be very similar, very close. And of course, Villanova was not able to pull out a victory. They still played well, despite not playing with Basco. If Basco plays, I would like to think the Wildcats win that game, even though it's not for certain. So this was a nice way to rebound with a win against DePaul, and now you get ready on Saturday to take on a St. John's team that has really struggled despite what people thought at the beginning of the season. And, they were 10-1 when they entered the Finn. You could say that the Wildcats really broke St. John's, over the past few weeks. And this is an opportunity for Villanova to sweep the season series against the Red Storm, win 2 consecutive games, and get to, 10 wins in the season and get things going as you head into the final half of this season.
Yeah, I think the Women's Big East Conference looked completely different in the non-conference season. Like you said, St. John's was 10-1 when they entered conference play. They came here into the Finn and they lost. It was a close game, but it's a good thing for Villanova to start conference play. And like you said, Marquette should be a winnable game. I think with Jasmine in that lineup, it's a completely different team, and I think they beat that team. To only lose by 5 points against the Marquette team.
Had the lead at half, too.
Yeah, had the lead at half. To come back and beat it. Villanova to have the lead at half and almost to come back and try to play competitive. But I think there's similarities between both the men's and women's basketball programs, and towards end of games, I think Villanova, they've had a lot of good first quarters, second quarters. I think as you get towards the end of the game is really where they kind of lose it, and a lot of these games for the Villanova women's team is lost in that fourth quarter, that end of the third quarter. So to come in and try to get back on the other side of the Big East Conference and beat St. John's again, I think that's a big thing. DePaul was a great win. I think DePaul's 4-2 in the Big East right now. They entered the Finn 4-1. They were probably the best team they probably played in the Big East besides UConn. Obviously, UConn is a clear number 1 in the women's conference. I think they have to really get a good statement win against St. John's to go in there. They're going to have to go to UConn on the road to end the month, and I think that's going to be really difficult. So to come out with a win over St. John's and sweep that season series is going to be a big thing for the Wildcats.
Yeah, I think the end of the game struggles are very similar for both the men's and the women's basketball program, but they're at 2 completely different, points in their trajectory moving forward. Yeah. Villanova men's team, they have a lot of veterans on that squad. You would expect them to do well in the final couple minutes and to know how to handle those situations. Villanova is led by 2 underclassmen, younger players, and Basco was a freshman, Weber was a sophomore. So I think, yes, they have other pieces, veterans. I think it's a little more common to expect that Villanova women's basketball would struggle kind of in those final few minutes. I actually think they've done a nice job at progressing in the fourth quarter of games over the past couple weeks. Yes, they had that tough loss to James Madison. They obviously had the buzzer beater loss against Seton Hall, but that loss was more, in my opinion, in the first quarter of that game than it was in the fourth quarter of that game, despite, struggling in the, final minute or so to kind of stop Seton Hall. They had some trouble against the press. Maddie Weber had a couple turnovers in that game. But I think in the fourth quarter games, from where they were in November, like I said, and early December, I think over the past few weeks, they have made much more progress in securing, the victory down the stretch and kind of putting away games. And I was going to bring it up earlier when you were talking about men's basketball, and then we kind of talked about something else. But, it's really hard to replicate those situations, close down the stretch where the environment is either really in favor of you or really against you. That's why I think, not to bring it back to the men's team, but a little bit, it's kind of hard to kind of replicate those situations in practice. Yes, you can go over free throws. Yes, you can kind of practice, okay, what are we going to run in these situations to try to beat teams? What do you think, depending on the opponent, what is their big player or their leading scorer going to try to do against us? But to replicate those situations, even close to what they're going to be is extremely difficult and hard to do. So I think Villanova women's basketball, they made some progress in the fourth quarter of games.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And as I'm looking at it here, they've only returned 28% of their scoring from last year. So to have a team that's so young, there's not a lot. There's a lot of vets, but obviously the 2 best are being led by a sophomore and a freshman, one a second year and a 1 year who's only played, just this season, in Jasmine. I think the biggest thing that Villanova needs to adapt to, especially, is size. I think, obviously women's basketball, Danae Carter's leading the team in 6.2 rebounds per game, and she's only 6 foot tall.
She's been excellent, by the way.
Yeah, she has.
I made it clear on social media, too. Obviously, Basco Weber, without Carter, Villanova would be in a lot of trouble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. But only at 6 foot, she's leading the team in rebounds with 6.2 rebounds. She's really filled a role that Villanova didn't think they would have somebody down there in the paint to grab those rebounds after Christina Dolce went to Maryland. So to have somebody that can step up, especially after a redshirt season, obviously was injured, had a leg injury, and to come back in here and play for the first time in a whole season, and has really looked great, 9 points per game. I think she's really a great wing player that can play offensively and defensively and plays both sides of the ball really well.
And Carter, kind of the duo of Carter and Edmondson. I know that Edmondson was out there for a little bit. She's back now, kind of coming off the bench in a little bit of a different role. Villanova's decided to keep Maddie Burke in that starting spot, at least for now, with a little bit of Caitlin Oriole every once in a while. But Danae Carter, I think you said it perfectly, Dylan. She really fits, the role that, in the beginning of the season you thought that Villanova wasn't going to have. She fits that role well, right? Grabbing rebounds and still scoring. I mean, yes, the first couple games a little bit of a struggle for Danae, but she has really picked up her scoring. And, you really look at what she's done, over the past few stretches. She had that tough injury against Delaware. She didn't miss much time, but, Coach Dillon said, of course, she was in some pain, but she has really responded after that game, against Delaware where she was injured, right? She scored 11 against Seton Hall, scored 10 against UConn, 15 against Georgetown, picked up 7 rebounds in that game against Georgetown and in that game against the Huskies. And also, too, I mean, yes, she did struggle against DePaul, played just 13 minutes, had 1 point. We don't know if there was a little bit of an injury there, but she also picked up 3 fouls in that game, so that probably also played a role in it. But kind of when you just look at those things in terms of rebounding for this team, yes, like you said, Dylan, she's not very tall, but she plays above her size, which, is really good for the Wildcats, moving forward. And DePaul is one of the best rebounding teams in the Big East, if not the best. And Villanova lost the rebounding battle by 5. They were very competitive with DePaul yesterday, and they actually got some really good rebounding out of their guards in Jasmine Basco and Danae Carter, Jasmine Basco and Maddie Weber, which, Coach Dillon talks about a lot, is, if Villanova's going to win games, they're going to need some rebounding and some good, boards picked up by their guards, and they have provided that this season. So Villanova will get ready to take on the St. John's Red Storm on Saturday in New York. Villanova won the first matchup 71-57 against the Red Storm. The Wildcats scored 24 points in the first quarter of that game. They had a big lead at halftime. Some players to watch for St. John's. Lachey Dwyer was just 4 for 15 against Villanova, had 12 points, but she's a much better player than what she showed against Villanova. Sky Owen is also a pretty good player. She can shoot the ball well from behind the arc, so those would be the 2 players to keep an eye out for. But with the way St. John's has played, over the past couple weeks, and really how much they've struggled since non-conference play, where they played some weaker competition, Villanova should win this game. I know it's a road contest, but Villanova, I think they'll be, a heavily favored, heavily advantaged in this game against the St. John's Red Storm. We'll take a break here on Villanova Sports Talk. We'll come back. We'll head over to Dylan, our track expert, with a little bit of track knowledge. We'll also quickly get to the poll questions, wrap things up here on Villanova Sports Talk. Stay tuned. Still 15 minutes left to go. We'll be right back after this.